So we are about to enter into our next panel and would love to invite Jenny to come up with us. Hi, Jenny. So
Hello.
nice to see you. Jenny, you're so cool. I just want to say that it's such a pleasure to be in this space with you. And I want to encourage everyone in the audience to check out Jenny's work. I mean, really, all you have to do is Google Jenny's name, and just like I did, you'll see Jenny's books. Anyway, Jenny, thank you again for being here. Tell us about this very first panel, the women's panel. What's about to happen?
Well, I'm so excited about it. I can't imagine getting a more stellar and diverse group of women here to talk about important issues like gender. We will be talking to Michaela Boehm, to Pat McCabe, who was already here, Sally Kempton, and Tami Simon. So women of diverse backgrounds and experience, but all who have amazing things to offer for us. I'll be co-hosting this women's panel with Yosi, and it's my honor to introduce our first speaker, Michaela Boehm. For those of you who don't know, she has an international practice teaching and counseling as an expert in intimacy and relationships, and many of her clients are well-known celebrities. She combines her training in psychology and extensive clinical counseling experience with an in-depth training in the yogic arts. She's the author of The Wild Women's Way and the founder of the nonlinear movement method of somatic release. Her work centers on the intersection of intimacy and embodiment. And I forgot to say that the format for this panel will be that each of the women will be invited to speak, to answer some questions that we have for 5 to 7 minutes each. We'll go through each participant, and then we will open it up so that they can respond to what the others have said for a more general conversation. So we'll begin now with Michaela. Michaela, welcome. I'm so glad to see you again. And what I was wanting to ask you, because I know this is a very important aspect of your work, is what is your understanding and experience of embodying the feminine and the masculine within?
Yes, and I'm glad you're starting me out with this question because it is an important aspect of my work. And recently, particularly recently, I've really gone away completely from calling it masculine and feminine, simply because there has been so much conflation, and it's confused with gender. It's confused with certain stereotypical aspects of gender. And while there's a place for identifying different aspects of ourselves as a lens for development and growth, I don't think it has to be masculine and feminine anymore. I want to say, though, that, of course, I was trained in a Shakta tradition where let's say the dynamics within and then outside of ourselves are described as Shiva and Shakti, which, loosely could be, said the female aspect and the male aspect of the divine, and they get to play in what often is called polarity. And in my tradition, we call it erotic friction, which is, I think, a really apt term when we look at what happens when the two poles play and sometimes also rub together in all the good and not so good ways. So there is a place for saying Shiva and Shakti, but then, of course, when that's likened to feminine and masculine, and then there is value assigned to getting things done as being masculine, and having plans and, being organized and showing up on time and meditating. And, many of these things are now considered masculine kind of in the, let's say, pop culture space. And then other things are considered feminine. Then I think that the lens gets somewhat clouded because we don't get to just feel who we are and what are the best parts of us and how can we play with both of those free from the lens or the stereotypical lens. So for myself and in my work, I call it go and flow. And the reason for that, of course, being that I work on the intersection of embodiment and the nervous system and how that affects relationship and how that affects sexuality. And so when we look at energy flow in the body and how the nervous system reacts to certain stimuli, we can look at go as what often is described as the masculine, which is up here, fully focused, getting things done, being in our head, thinking, doing, planning. And the reason why I call it go is it has a kind of a forward, let's say, slightly gathered and then forward tendency of kind of, taking things on, of penetrating, of, attacking in the energetic domain, not necessarily in the physical domain. And so with that said, go happens up here because that's where we need the energy. And since the body is incredibly energy efficient, the body pulls away from where we don't need it. Like, for instance, I'm seated right now, right? I don't need a lot of energy in the lower body, and pulls it up to where it's needed. And when that becomes habitual, then the pattern of pool tension and, just being up here. And then flow, of course, is the part of us, or the movement of energy down into the lower parts of the body, where the pleasure and intuition happen, but also where there's a power center and where there is the ability to enjoy pleasure and also connect with others intuitively, empathically, via mirror neurons, via oxytocin. All of those kind of things fall into the flow domain. And so I look at it as every human being having go and flow, and very much like parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, go and flow have to play together to create a homeostatic experience of our expression. And my passion has been to essentially allow each person to find that expression that's true for them and only them, without there being a label or a judgment on one or the other, and to give tools to get out of the habitual head into the body, or give tools to bring the body to the head, or however you want to slice it. So that's kind of my take on masculine and feminine within and outside. And then the last thing I want to say before my time is up is that, of course, when we then look at what makes erotic connection, and that's not gender specific, but whomever we are erotically connected to typically holds the opposite pole of what we enjoy, let's say, erotically. That is not necessarily intercourse, but whatever we enjoy, we typically have an opposing force for that play. That's why it's called the play of the erotic. And so the more we are clear on who we truly are and how we express internally, the better and the more effectively and the more joyously we can polarize in that erotic play with another. So there is an internal balancing and bringing both online and understanding what has to happen so you're able to have them, accept them, and then play with them, and then take them to the outside for enjoyable relationship. So that's, I think, where I'm going to leave it. This was a quick and dirty jump into those kind of things.
Well, thank you, Michaela. That was a very rich exploration of a lot of intriguing ideas. I really love your perspective, and I appreciate your wrapping it up as quickly as you did. So I'll turn it over to Yosi then to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Michaela. So let's see if I can go with the flow here and just bring the go and the flow together. And as I move to introduce Sally here, Sally, it's a pleasure and an honor, and I'm so delighted you are here with us. You have been involved in the feminist movement since its second wave, I believe in the 70s. and you were a reporter and a writer about the topics, and even had some pieces published at Esquire magazine and elsewhere. And now you're a spiritual teacher in the yogic tradition, and you're the author of Awakening Shakti, outlining the archetypes of the goddess in the in that tradition, and how those energies can be used to empower women, different goddess energies. Now, curiously enough, I have attended one of your workshops about the goddess energy archetypes, and as a man, I found them relevant. So it's kind of interesting that those archetypal goddess energies can reside in all of us. I hope I'm not misspeaking, but anyway, I'm curious how you think about what, these energies of Shiva and Shakti that Michaela talked about, but is also are in your tradition, and how they live in you, how they impact your life and your relationships. And I'm also interested, I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you. You could choose and pick where you want to go with it. But as a woman, what's been your joy and privilege of being a woman in this world? And what's been your sorrow and pain?
Well, let me say a little bit about the Shiva Shakti polarity, following on what Michaela said. As I started thinking about what I wanted to talk about during this panel, I realized that what is most interesting to me these days and is really integrating the so-called masculine and the so-called feminine, because it's only as we integrate polarities that we're actually able to not only engender love between ourselves and other people, but also actually experience the potential that in this time we're being invited to experience. So, in the Indian tradition, there's a figure called Ardhanarishwar, which means the half woman lord. And in this figure, it's Shiva and Shakti, Shiva and his consort goddess Parvati, in a single body. And in the right half, the right side of the body, which is said to be the masculine side, for those of you who want to try this at home, Shiva stands like a pillar with his very buff bare chest and his snake around his neck and his jata and his trident. And on the left side, Parvati is dancing and her waist is curved. She's got her hand up in the air. She's got a mirror that she's looking into, which represents the world as the reflection of Shakti, because Shakti in this tradition, in the Shiva Shakti tradition, is the world. And it, of course, this image represents the non-duality of the masculine and feminine, the source of the universe, which is this utter absolute unity in which the lovers, Shiva Shakti, separate in order to regard each other. And out of that separation, a world is created. Shakti creates a world. And so the really radical thing about this understanding of masculine and feminine is that in this tradition, the Shiva energy, which, as Michaela said, it's really very much beyond gender at this level. In other words, Shiva is not a man, Shakti is not a woman. They're really aspects of the divine reality. They're qualities of consciousness. And Shiva represents the witness quality, the ground of being, the substance out of which everything is made, existence itself. And Shakti represents the power within reality. So Shiva, as it were, and this is a statement of the Tantras, Shiva without Shakti is Shava, is a corpse, is inactive. And Shakti without Shiva basically is crazy chaos. So the two of them live together as the substance, the ground of the universe, and as the power which brings all things into existence. So in my understanding of the tradition, all of us, men, women, plants, animals, stone, rocks, we're all made of Shakti. In other words, we're all made of the divine feminine. The world is made of the divine feminine. And the awareness which stands aside from the world, forms its substratum, and endlessly witnesses the dance, is the masculine. So when we talk about integrating, we're not simply talking about integrating the so-called or what we might call the more superficial or socially constructed or biologically constructed, we can, discuss which is which, aspects of the masculine and the feminine. We're really talking about integrating the deep polarities in consciousness, that which is eternally witnessing, uninvolved, transcendent, and that which is delighting in manifesting infinite creativity in and as the world. And one of the things that I've had to discover has been really how to remove myself from the intensely masculine oriented quality of my own upbringing and my own understanding, and even the spirituality that I practiced, which is very much witness oriented, transcendence oriented, intellectually oriented, disembodied. In other words, women in our society, especially among the educated postmodern group of women, they're not really that different from men in that we're all cut off from our bodies. We all have to learn to court the feminine in our bodies and really to bring them back online. And this means working with sensation, working with the erotic within ourselves, working with intuition. And for many of us, and certainly for me, a lot of my learning in adult life has been actually learning how to feel into my body, and in feeling into my body, to feel into the power of my femininity, that is, the power of the Shakti, which has become my body. And what I have come to realize is that, there's a very profound idea, which is mostly in Western esoteric mysticism, about the sacred marriage. And the sacred marriage is the coming together of polarities, not only the masculine and feminine polarities, but the polarities between earth and heaven, between inside and outside, between reason and emotion, between scientism and mysticism. So the sacred marriage is really bringing together all the ways in which the qualities of Shiva have been translated into human life, and the qualities of Shakti have been translated into human life, to remove our ideas about masculine and feminine from the old structures of patriarchy without substituting a form of matriarchy, so that we can begin to recognize that though we have different flavors, we have different emphases. Some of us are more intellectually oriented, some of us more physically oriented, some of us more girly, some of us more macho, if you will. Nonetheless, it's the same consciousness operating through us, and our self-integration demands that we integrate all of these polarities sooner or later, and hopefully sooner, because the heart of reality is androgynous. It's not single gendered. Okay, Yosi.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. This is delightful. What I find fascinating is that as a woman, you had to discover what you're calling, so to speak, the feminine, which is about embodiment and getting in your body. And you've been a spiritual seeker for a long time, and you were seeking, sort of doing the masculine version of spirituality. I think you have a breakout focused on the feminine and masculine forms of spirituality and how they can be integrated. And so it's curious that even though a woman, you had to work on this so-called feminine side. And you're also, in a sense, advertising for Michaela's breakout, which is about the embodied path to intimacy. So anyway, I just wanted to say that that was beautiful. So I'm going to turn it back to Jenny to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Tami Simon. She's the founder of Sounds True, which is focused on disseminating spiritual wisdom. She also hosts the popular Sounds True podcasts, Insights at the Edge, and she started the Sounds True Foundation, which provides equitable access to transformational tools and teachings, and Sounds True's Inner MBA program, an online immersion that trains business leaders in the inner wisdom skills needed for exceptional results in work and in life. She's an amazing woman. And so I'll turn it over to Tami and say, Tami, we're dying to talk to you. I've got some questions for you. It's great to see you again.
Nice to be with everyone. Thank you for this invitation and for this opportunity to speak.
So Tami, I was wanting to ask you the question that I asked Michaela. What's your understanding and experience of embodying masculine and feminine, or go and flow, or Shiva, Shakti, any of the other names we know these polarities by?
I think I'd like to approach that by sharing a bit from the inside of my personal journey. Yeah, just to start very personally, which is, as I was growing up, I remember very distinctly, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I got a lot of questions. Are you a boy or are you a girl? And I would get these questions all over the place. And in the school system, I went to this particular school, but then I was part of some enrichment program where I went to a large public school. And I just remember at the large public school, so many people coming up to me and asking me that. And I didn't really know how to respond. I mean, I wanted to say I'm a girl, and I just wanted to say, like, why are you picking on me? Like, can I just be myself? Can I just be myself? And, in many ways, I think that's been the cry from my heart my whole life. And even as I hear this discussion of masculine and feminine and everything, I try to create a taxonomy inside me of my different qualities and different experiences and different things and polarities. And I think I just want to be myself. And guess what? Myself contains it all. It contains all of it. And of course, yes, it's in a woman's body. And I'm fine with that because that's the reality of here. I menstruated, I went through menopause. That's the reality. I'm good with that. I'm good with reality and the form that I'm in. Other people may have thoughts about it. And, you're less reliable as a businesswoman because only 4% of business leaders are female CEOs. We don't trust them. Mine, that's everybody else's trip. That's not what's coming from inside me. What's coming from inside me is I have a lot of capabilities and qualities, and those capabilities and qualities in an integrated way within me give me the ability to really connect and listen and also really drive stuff forward, go and flow. I love those words, Michaela. And Sally, I loved what you said about the integration of polarities, because to me, my whole life has been a journey of integration. Whether that's integrating absolute boundlessness and the boundaries of my form, timelessness and time, feeling timeless, and at the same time expressing myself in this moment right here as someone who's 60 years old. Both are true. So I've lived in this world of both are true, both are true, both are true. How are both true? Both are true in me. Are they woven together? They're not even separated. How could they be woven together? I'm experiencing them both. Am I a wave or a particle, for Christ's sake? I don't know. I'm both a wave and a particle, depending on the moment you look at it. And so that's where the conversation goes for me. And as a young person, of course, it was a lot harder for me. And I remember discovering June Singer's book on androgyny when I was 17 or 18 years old. And I don't think I even understood most of it. I just loved the fact that it was called androgyny, and I would read it and I would be like, oh, maybe there's a place for me because a woman like this wrote a book like this. So maybe I'm okay. Like maybe the world's going to accept the fact that I'm not identifying in any of these categories because this book exists. So that just tells you a little bit kind of about me and the journey towards being true, which to me is really the core journey and doesn't conform to other people's or social views of my gender.
Thank you so much, Tami. I can't tell you how much I resonate with what you just said. As somebody who's always been called androgynous myself and loved it, I'd rather be androgynous than anything else. So thank you. And also thank you for personalizing the conversation with some of your own experience. Just in the interest of time, I think, Yosi, I'll go ahead and let you introduce our last speaker, and then we can open it up to a more general conversation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tami, again, for bringing it down to the personal level and talking about your journey. And so our next speaker is someone that's already been introduced. It's Pat McCabe. So delighted to have you here again. I was touched and moved by your invocation and creating sacred space for all of us this morning, and bringing the wisdom of your elders and calling on all these energies and outlining how water permeates all of life and all of us, and it's circulating through all of us. So anyway, I do know, and you spoke about this, you have this program, Women Stand Shining, but you've also been working, besides empowering women, about this reconciliation between what you call women's nation and men's nation, and how that's important for global peace ultimately. So that's very resonant and speaks to the pain that we've experienced. Now, Michael Mead today spoke of something of this notion of two-spirited individual that is in many indigenous native traditions. I don't know if that's happens to be in the tradition you belong to, but I'd be curious to hear, are you two-spirited in some sense? Are we all two-spirited? And also just, I'm going to bring it back to the personal. What has been the joy and privilege for you for being a woman, and what's been the pain and sorrow in your personal life? If you can bring that in, I want both other women to hear this, as well as men to have some empathy, and other individuals that are connected here. I think we all need to have some greater understanding and empathy to know what it's like to walk in your other's shoes.
Thank you, Yosi. Wow, well, that's a pretty broad spectrum of inquiry there. So I'm going to say that within Dene culture, it's my understanding that we also hold space, sacred space for what the world commonly calls two-spirit. I'm going to say that I don't know that word applies in all indigenous culture. It's not necessarily pan-indigenous, but there is a spectrum of gender, and also in the Lakota tradition that I was adopted into. And I'm going to say that, you know, for quite a long time now, my exploration has been from a very, I guess I'll say, hetero perspective, because I just feel like I had to start somewhere, and I was starting, you know, I was appreciating you, Tami, starting with the personal there. And so it's only been very recently that I've been speaking a little bit about how I see the spectrum of gender, and I'm really feeling it when we talk about queering up spaces, queering up ideas, queering up you know, it's moving us out of the either or, and there's so much that needs to happen in so many different areas. And so I just feel like that medicine is really powerful for us in this transformation time. So I'm just going to go briefly there, because I really want to get into the second question that you're asking, the joy and the sorrow and the suffering. So I think the joy for me, so I want to I want to lay this out there a little bit, which is that in ceremony, you know, when I was heading into my elder womanhoodship, I was told, you know, you're going to be invisible now in the world. And anyway, it was not a happy prospect. And so in ceremony, I was kind of railing and ranting and asking, you know, and you know, to Michaela's point, you know, what do we really mean when we say masculine? What do we really mean when we say feminine? Those words are so loaded by so many things, but in its essential nature, I guess I was trying to get to what are we really talking about there? And so what I was told in ceremony was, that's a really good question. Because we think we know what we mean when we say masculine, and we think we know what we mean when we say feminine, but we don't know. All we know is how these two energetics behave in what I call power over paradigm. And so power over paradigm is where we must have power over another in order to have what we need. And that elicits a certain aspect out of masculinity and femininity. And so if we're completely embedded in modern world paradigm, that's our relativity around gender. However, if we plug those energetics into a completely different paradigm, then we get a completely different response. We get a completely different expression. We get a completely different kind of synergy and functional polarity. And so as I was thinking about it culturally, I was feeling like, yeah, I get to witness that. I get to witness, you know, in modern world paradigm, you can't hardly say all the women are going to go in first. That creates an uproar immediately right now. You can't say that. But in ceremony, we could say that. And that was a big reflection for me coming out of like my American girl persona, because my grandparents and parents were taken into residential boarding schools in which our cultural understanding, including our cultural understanding of what the medicine of gender could be and how it contributes to what I'll say the human being's perfect design for thriving life is our contribution, as I brought up this morning, to this sacred hoop. You know, we missed out on those teachings, so I've had to come into it. And so I say my American girl persona was pretty alarmed when they started calling for women to be over here and men being over there, because usually when that kind of talk starts happening, I'm about to have a big infringement of my rights. But I learned to calm down enough to listen and observe and watch how those energetics are held and expressed from a really different paradigm of how to be a human presence on this Mother Earth. And so for me, that's an important piece. And as I listen, I keep hearing everything being relative to this one way of modern world paradigm and sort of gender being crammed through that lens. But what happens when we open that up? So I think I'll finish. I don't think I have too much more time, but I'll say that, you know, my sorrow, I think, as a woman currently is you know, I really have deep compassion for men's nation. And what I realized was that when I didn't understand my own possibility, and I'm going to say I learned about my own possibility of what my feminine medicine is in ceremony and during the years of my menstruation time, when I learned that I could be a dreamer for the people and that actually nobody else could do what I could do during that time. So in that sense, I'm going to say that for me, I don't feel like gender is a cultural construct. My biology gives me a spiritual capacity at different times. But when I came into that space of understanding more about what my capacity was, I began to look and see and ask myself, well, what is the masculine capacity? And so I feel like my biggest sorrow probably is withholding love from the masculine. Because in the power over paradigm, that was a tool that was available to me to be able to try to equal the power, the very, very unequal power structure that the feminine held in that paradigm. And so I resorted to dirty tactics, I'm going to say, when I thought that those were my only possibilities. So to withhold love, to belittle, to withhold a sense of appreciation and pride. to be able to feel like I could have some kind of leverage in that paradigm. So it's been such a freedom for me to step out of that paradigm, that expression of my own gender and the recognition of masculine gender and the spectrum of genders, and be able to look at it from a more circular way versus this power over paradigm pyramid way. Maybe I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's touching. The greatest sorrow is the love withheld. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that Angel's Arian says, the greatest remorse is love unexpressed. So our hearts love to love, and our greatest pain is withholding love from ourselves and each other. So it just touches me that
But I'm making up for it now. I'm trying anyway.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, let's just open it up for all of you to comment and discuss. And
Yeah. Would somebody like to go first to reflect on what you heard from one of the others? Some of our panelists?
Well, I guess I'll go first then. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm utterly blown away by everything I've just heard, and it feels like such an incredible honor to be on this panel and hear these things and hear them expressed so beautifully and eloquently. So, you know, I don't even know where to start. I was like, when Sally was talking, I was like, yes. And then when Tami was sharing, it was such a beautiful space to hear. I want to start there, Tami, by saying that the fact that the way you said, I just want to be me, there's such freedom in there, I think, for everyone to not have to be anything other than who we are. And that by mirroring this, or by modeling this, I should say, it gives permission to everyone else. And I think that's something that I found very, very touching. And Pat, I don't even know where to start. I almost cried when you were talking about, you know, the compassion and the love for the men's nation and the, you know, the stepping out of that dynamic. And Sally, I don't even, you know, I can't, I'm just like, yes, 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 yes. So, yeah, I just start there by saying, I think they're very nuanced and beautiful ways to look at how can we step into who we truly are without having to box ourselves into certain behaviors or certain ways of being. And in the work that I do, and in the, you know, I've done over 35,000 client hours in one-on-one counseling client hours in my lifetime. I've never actually met anybody who is normal and, you know, who I would consider normal. And particularly when it comes to relationship and the expression of who we are in relationship, by giving permission to actually people being who they really are, I think the world's a so much richer place. And anytime that can be modeled, I think is very important.
And in relationship to that, I would say that the work of discovering who you are, who you really are, in terms of the distribution of polarities in your system, in terms of what you really care about, in terms of what, you know, what really opens your heart and allows you to love, it is really the work of a lifetime. At least that's been my experience, because we always start out trying to fit in to what we conceive of as a social paradigm, or, you know, or the family paradigm. And if we're in sync with it, then we feel normal. If we're not in sync with it, we feel weird. So, you know, a lot of the pain that people, I would say, who end up with lives like we've had, because I can see with you guys and probably many of the people who are part of this event, are people who've grown up feeling weird, feeling, you know, feeling not like everybody else in their community, having to find a tribe or a way of describing reality that that can allow them to feel good about who they are. And only then is it actually possible to honestly discover who you are, what you're here for. For me, I'm pretty old now. It's really been in the last 20 years, and maybe even in the last 10, that I feel that I'm sitting fully in myself as a woman, as a human being, as someone being motivated by what I guess you could call authenticity and integrity. And I do think that transcending or working with the gender polarities and all the polarities of good, bad, up, down, smart, stupid, all those things is a very necessary part of this process of coming to know the self.
I wanted to add one thing, kind of both sort of combination of questions here. To begin, Pat, when you said queering up spaces, what did you mean by that? Because I thought, let's queer up this space, let's do it. I want to contribute to that, but I want to make sure I understand what you meant.
I find it's about, again, not making things either or, but noticing, like there's really very little in this world that's completely black and white, so to speak, right? And so really naming that fluidity and how one contributes to the other or reflects the other or is present in the other. And at the same time, my daughter, Lila June, presented a talk on the sacredness of two. So it's not that we throw it all away all the time. And yet there's much of things being either or, that the queering up for me is that integration that we're talking about, but on many different levels. Yeah.
All right, wonderful, good. Then I'm going to keep going with queering up the Zoom space here, because one thing, Michaela, when you were talking about erotic play and the sort of Shiva Shakti erotic play and the tension that can come, what I notice is that's one of the things that sometimes I have a reaction to that. And the reason is that I think I'm in a relationship with a woman, and I think people from the outside are like, oh, that's a butch femme dynamic or something. And I think, no, you have no idea what's going on here. You have no idea. Let me queer it up for you. We're both engaged in an integration within ourselves, and the way that we interact with each other in any given moment, who would know? And also my sexual attractions they're all over the place. They are so broad. They are multitudes. They don't fit into any kind of Shiva Shakti paradigm. The all kinds of people that I'm attracted to for all kinds of reasons. And so I feel often when it gets into like the sexual tension or what creates that, and that's when we really need to bring forward these masculine and feminine. I just think, wow, honestly, there's so much subtlety missing in that. So that would just be a queered up comment.
I actually agree with you. I actually agree with you, and that's what I meant, right? That's why I don't use Shiva Shakti or masculine, feminine, because I do think that the erotic space is so much more. And I think Sally said it very beautiful, the beholder, right? The one who beholds, the one who, plays is in all of us at all times. And the whole masculine, feminine thing makes it so that it gets massively diminished into, like you said, it's like you're supposed to play with that. So that's why when I say the erotic play, I'm talking about everything outside of masculine, feminine. And I agree with you. I think that's true for most people. What we're attracted to are energies and all of those kind of things that create that dynamic, amazing, creative space. And then, of course, there comes a moment where all of that dissolves into a oneness. Right? Like just that wide open space when it all collapses into that oneness, and then we'll pull it apart again into that wild tussle of everything. So I could not agree with you more, and I'm very happy then to say, that is, if that is the queering up of a space, I am all for it.
Yeah, I was going to comment too. I wish I could quote what the moment that I heard about you talking about about this erotic interplay, and
Yeah.
and just there was like a touching you were talking about of that there's like a giver or a receiver. You didn't say that though, but anyway, I just felt like I saw something new that I hadn't quite seen before. So I just want to say that I heard that in what you were saying. As I think about this integration piece, I think right now, you know, as I've been asking myself, I've been saying that, you know, for me, I feel like the masculine medicine, because it's been so equated with power over paradigm, that in fact we call it patriarchy, right? And for me, the patriarchy isn't men's nation, it's the paradigm that this energetic has been plugged into. And so for me, that feels really important to be able to release men from that identity, or the masculine from that identity, because then it frees up another possibility. And so I've been really feeling like, I think, you know, and these are kind of extractive terms, I'm trying to find a new way to say this, but I feel like the sacred masculine is like this wild card unknown medicine that we have yet to access, because it has been so identified with this power over paradigm. But if we remove it from that, what can it be? Who can they be, so to speak? So I say, I don't think we even know who Men's Nation is right now. They're an unknown entity, and I have this excitement about this idea about them showing up and coming in a completely different way. And so in terms of my integration with that, to open up that space, one, I've been trying to create a narrative for sacred masculine. There's very, very little narrative for sacred masculine. Eve Ensler said, you know, when we don't have a narrative for something, it remains largely invisible to us. And so right now, that sacred masculine is fairly invisible. So that's one thing that I've been working on, is trying to give language. So I call it, you know, the waker of the dreaming egg. I call it the sacred architects of the dream and the vision. I call them, you know, all different things. But I'm also thinking about, you know, in my own personal life, in a relationship I'm in currently is fairly new. You know, my companion says, you know, my feminine, he's a man, and he says, my feminine loves your masculine, and your masculine loves my feminine, and that's where we're really meeting. But what I'm finding for myself, and this is what I feel like my work is, in order to be able to host a space for sacred masculine to arrive, and I heard that in what you were saying this morning, Yosi, is I keep bumping into the constructs that have been instilled in me about what masculine is. So to have my companion cry, to have my companion, I don't know, speak in this new language, I find myself having to confront, I bump into it, and then I say, but if you want it, exactly what you were saying, Yosi, if you want this, if you're trying to make space for it, you have to make space for it, and you have to change, you know, you have to notice where your constructs are. So this is a big part of my work, and I call that part of the masculine feminine integration as well.
Oh, beautiful. I'm so touched by that. And the point is, even people such as yourselves who've done so much inner work are still struggling with some of that. And I think that's beautiful. And I so appreciate your thing is that there is very little about what is the sacred masculine. I was in a PhD program at the school, and there was all the stuff about divine feminine, but there's nothing about sacred masculine. And
I'm writing a book about the
awesome. Okay. So,
yeah,
but
I think we have to bring in Sophie Strand's The Flowering Wand.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Huge contribution right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, but you said you don't know, but I'd invite you or anybody else. What would you like as women? What would you like the divine masculine to be? I know this may be off for a women's panel, but
well, I want to say one thing as the part of me that is a traditionally feminine. You know, men and women have different ways of protecting their loved ones, and I think that in you know, for a woman, especially a woman who's like us, trying to do something big in the world and trying to do something different with our lives, because of the nature of this society, it's incredibly helpful to have a protective masculine being in our lives. And that being doesn't have to be a guy. You know, it can be a woman, but it has to be somebody who holds that masculine, let's call it this, the warrior quality, who's committed to, to protecting, to having the back of, of the feminine. And that's, I think, true for ourselves as well. We need the sacred masculine to hold us, really to support us from behind, as the masculine needs the feminine to support them from behind. And in somehow part of the deal we've made in this world is somehow to have each other's back, whether it's in a couple, in a family, in a tribe, in a workplace, in a friendship. And the qualities of, let's say, warrior protection, which is, I know, the standard view of the masculine in that role, and the nurturer, the practical nurturer, which is the standard view of the feminine in that role. We need these beings in our lives. We need these figures in our lives. And in a certain sense, in our relationships, we maybe make an agreement with each other. Who's going to be that for you at this moment? But I get to be that for you in a different moment. And part of that is the nature of integration of the masculine, of the let's say the warrior and the nurturer in relationship. That's, and I so what I was going to say is that I think we all want somebody to hold us, to be fully present for us, to be on our side no matter what. And that in a certain way, that's the thing that we don't want to throw out in the integration process of coming to embody the qualities of both genders within ourselves.
We still need each other, yeah.
We still need each other.
Even if we have the potential for everything, at any one moment, we could sit in one and need the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm having an experience currently where I have been called on to steward land. It's part of Land Back, which, for people who don't know, is this idea that maybe a good idea would be able to give land back to the original indigenous stewards in different places in this nation. And so I find myself, I wasn't asking for it, but I find myself in a land back situation where I'm stewarding and providing sacred hospitality of 140 acres at the base of one of our sacred mountains. And so I'm learning about what sacred hospitality will mean by giving our people ceremonial access in a place where we haven't had it. So people are saying to me, you're providing matriarchal leadership. Land is being returned back to the matriarch. So there's all these stories and constructs that weren't where I was. I just was answering a call to spirit, and all this came. And but as I look at it, I'm thinking, so what I feel like the mountain is calling in is, my son came forward and suddenly, he wasn't that interested. And suddenly he says, I was born for this, Mom, and I'm going to stand with you and make sure this is successful. And he's just been showing up. And this was like, I don't know where this came from. This new companion of mine is saying to me, I'm your servant warrior. To serve you is to serve life, is to serve the earth, because you're hearing the vision and you're enacting the vision. I have 2 healer men living and caretaking the place right now. So there's like this foundation of 4 men who are offering up this level of support and protection and care in service to a matriarchal holding. But I say, I can go along with matriarchal leadership as long as you realize I'm not the matriarch. The mountain is the matriarch. But I am the receiver of dream and vision, and I can help shepherd that vision about the mountain. And the men are saying, yes, we're here in support of you in that. So this is a really new, very new dynamic for me. And I was deflecting those words, servant warrior. I'm like, oh, well, and the grandmas came in and they were like, you cut that out. You don't deflect that. You don't push that aside. That is a holy, holy offering on the part of these men. And your job is to learn how to receive it with such graciousness that you create a level of fulfillment all the way around, full circle, for the whole community by receiving that offer. So this
It's not
for me.
disempowering you. Sorry, Michaela, go ahead.
I was just umming and ahhing in pleasure about this. Actually, I think that there's something so beautiful in everybody just talking about this, because as Sally was speaking, I was kind of feeling back into my parents, and you know how it goes. You leave home and you have to do your own thing, and kind of, you know, somewhat distance from family, you know, as a tool of individuation. And kind of when I started doing couples therapy, I really a lot of times went back to what my parents modeled, and as Sally was speaking, that actually I had like my parents appear in front of me, because I had this really very lucky upbringing in the sense that both of my parents did both for each other. So my father was incredibly protective and had a classical provider role in the sense that he went to work so my mother could stay home and raise us. And he was very protective, but he was incredibly nurturing and loving and physically nurturing, and with my sister and I and my mother. And so I got to see a man who was both fiercely protective, but also very deeply loving and very physically, you know, attentive and emotional. I'd see my father cry and at movies or things like that. And then on the other hand, my mother, who raised my sister and I as a stay-at-home mother, was incredibly fierce and protective when my father had a near deadly accident that put him in ICU for 6 months, and she had to kind of really advocate for him because he wasn't able to. And I got to see the warrior in my mother in a way that was really, you know, I mean, I remember I was only 5 or so, but I remember back then thinking, wow, she's going in there. And when we look at how can we honor men, you know, in this way, and what Pat said there, and also what Tami said about being able to fluidly, you know, enjoy all aspects. I think it's important to honor everything. You know, when I saw my dad cry, which I did and still do, but just when I left the last time, my dad cried, left, right? Openly cried, because, you know, they're in their 80s. So anytime I leave, I live, you know, on the other side of the world, it could be the last time, and it makes me cry now, right? Like his open love for me was such a gift. And I think to accept that that's part of men, right, in the non-conventional way, that, like Pat was saying, the crying or the showing emotion, all of that it's just such a heart opening thing, and then to know we can do that for each other.
Thank you. That was so moving, Michaela. I'm fortunate to have parents like that too. So, which may be one reason I'm as mixed as I am, because both of them supported the different polarities in me. One thing that is, I just want to reflect on, and maybe it's only me, but all of us are older on this panel, maybe older than a number of the participants. And so we're not as much subject to the, perhaps, I'll just say perhaps, the strong sexual urges and the needs of younger people as they're individuating to find a partner, not find a partner, but find a path in life that may involve some kind of sexual or partnered relationship. So it may be easy for us to be wise now, or relatively easier. I don't know if it's ever easy to be wise, but it might be relatively easier for us because some of those strong hormonal drives are not pushing us the way they used to. or we've chosen a path in life and we've lived it now, or we're still in the middle of it. So I'm just wondering how you all might reflect on the difference between being the ages we are and what it would be like if, what it was like for us when we were younger and were maybe more buffeted by these forces to conform or to find a partner or make some of those choices about sexual expression and gendered expression.
Oh my God, yes. Well, I would say I spent let's say the middle 15 years of my life, like starting around age 14, constantly either, in love with somebody, looking for somebody to be in love with, breaking up with somebody, dealing with my heartbreak, looking for the next person. I mean, everything in my life took second place to my desire for the ultimate love relationship. And actually the big turning point in my life, which is not something I recommend, but it was the way my life went, was having the realization that my constant pursuit of romantic love was keeping me from doing anything serious with the rest of my life. And so just decided to stop pursuing it. And at the moment I stopped pursuing it, first of all, my ability to express my own talents became, much more out front. And secondly, my relationships with men became free in a way that they had never been before, because I was not trying to attract them. I was not trying to, to get them not to make a pass at me or whatever it was. And the real transformation in my life, and again, this is a unique situation, was when I became a Swami. I began wearing orange robes. The first time in my life, nobody was hitting on me. I had never realized that I had lived my life constantly in this sexualized dialogue, either coming from them or coming from me. And there was a freedom in it that absolutely transformed my life and blew my mind. And I would say that it's a very healthy thing to spend a little time being celibate. And I'm not saying you spend 30 years being celibate as I did, but that you actually step aside from your belief, if you have one, that your personal sexual relationships are the most significant thing in life, just to find out who you are without them. Sort of the way you might take out an addiction, something that you eat that you have allergies to or that you have an addiction to. It's a very, very interesting process, and it really changes everything. So consider, young people, spending 6 months or a year not in a relationship or not looking for a relationship, and notice that it makes a difference.
Thanks, Sally. So between the lines of what you were saying, though, I was hearing that it can be a nuisance for you as a woman to have had so much sexual attention and energy directed at you. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, it's one of the undercurrents of women's lives.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that all women have to deal with, either because people are attracted to them or because people aren't attracted to them. It's a major issue of women's identity, also of men's identity, of course.
Yeah. So it sounds like part of you wanted that attraction, part of you found it too much or a nuisance or something.
I don't totally wanted that attraction, but I only wanted it from the people I wanted it from.
Yeah.
And I think, so that seems to be the labyrinth that we live in with relationships.
Yeah. So this touches into the thing I was trying to highlight, or have you each go into personally. What is the difficulty of living in the world as a woman? What is the pain and difficulty? I mean, all of you have matured, as pointed out. You're older. You've done a lot of inner work, but so you may have to kind of drudge your memories back for the days you were younger or maybe not so empowered or evolved or whatever. But I think it'd be important for all of us and for our audience to hear what are some of the ways living in this world as a woman is hard or painful, and then what are some of the joys, like Pat said, that you can give life and so on. I don't know, whatever.
Could you maybe speak about that, Tami? We haven't heard from you in a while, and it looked like you were thinking about.
Sure. Well, I wanted to pick up on a slightly different thread, if that's okay, which is, Yosi, when you asked a question previously, you said, okay, women, what do you want in the sacred masculine, or the kind of masculine you want in your life? And what I've been examining in my own life, and I think it picks up a thread, Pat, where you were talking about patriarchy as a form of power over. What I've been examining is my own internalization of patriarch, my own inner patriarch, if you will, and how that expresses itself, and how painful and damaging that is for me in my relationships. And I took that on. Michaela, you talked about your parents, and in my family, a pretty conventional marriage between my mom and my dad. And, my dad was up here on a pedestal. When he came home from work, there was a sectioned grapefruit waiting for him, and his slippers and everything at the door and the whole thing. And I was like, I'm going to be a lot more like dad than mom, because if I'm a lot more like dad, I'm going to get all these goodies in the world, and I'm going to get to go out and, leave the house, and I'm not going to sit around and, section grapefruits and stuff. But what happened also is that has played out for me, both in business and in my relationships, in a way that there's a certain kind of power entitlement that doesn't actually serve me, and it's not coherent with my true heart. And the journey I've been on is to have power with, to really have ennobling and empowering relationships where I'm caring for other people, lifting them up, and I have no need to be the dominant one. I don't need that. And so I'm working through as I age, and it's a real serious process of shadow work to come into my own version of a super healthy masculine, as well as, just to use the language to make the case here, and a super healthy feminine as well. And that's been an evolutionary process inside of me. On the quote unquote feminine side, it's had to do with my feeling nature and being okay with the utter sensitivity that I have as a person, and being open and allowing of that. So anyway, I think it's interesting, as we do the developmental work inside of us, we start laying down a new template for a healthy masculine and healthy feminine in the world.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
I want to say something about the joys of being a woman, to pick back up on your question, because I definitely have to say that I love having a woman's body, and I love being a woman. And one of the things that I really, really love about it, and always have, is the enormous variety of rising and falling in not only, menstrual cycles, but also, the moon, the tides, all of those things being contained in the body, to me, has been an incredible gift. And being able to kind of have that body, and have that body have so much effect on my, day-to-day life, has been a real joy, in the sense that it's also made me very acutely aware of nature and the cycles in nature. And really, and I'm very, very fortunate in the sense, as Pat is saying, with stewarding a piece of land. Thankfully, my piece of land is not nearly as big. I have a couple of acres, 5 acres, but it's a lot of work. But there's something, and I can't even imagine 140 acres, but there's something so profound about one's body starting to resonate with nature and where the sun rises and the sun goes down, and the different cycles and the phases, and to be able to own that in my own body, and not only enjoy that as seeing myself as part of cyclical nature, I think has been one of the real joys of being a woman. And as I'm getting older, I'm appreciating it even more, of course, because there is fairly profound hormonal changes and things happening that make it such that, you know, I can't even really put words on it. It's the feeling of being part of nature in the most profound way that I think has been a profound gift of being a woman in a woman's body. And then the other thing within that is, those who know me know I have an enormous amount of rescue animals. I mean, everything you can imagine, from donkeys to, you know, three-legged, one-eyed dogs and whatever else in between. And the enormous capacity for love and nurturing. And even though I chose not to have children, I have so many children that I get to, you know, really, really nurture. And that feeling of, if not giving birth, but giving life to life, is, I think, what gets me up in the morning. And so that to your question.
So I think, well, one, I want to go back to you, Jenny, about this elder woman's sexuality piece. And I'm like, I'm a little bit famous for telling the story about going through menopause. And I went through this phase where I said anything that moved was of sensual interest to me. Like, I don't know what happened, but I had some kind of hormonal something. And like, I couldn't even stand in line at the bank. Okay. It was like there were bodies close to me. And I was just like, oh my God. And this thought went through my mind. And I think about it and I think, what a weird thought. But my thought was, if I were a man, I'd be a really bad man right now. And so it doesn't always happen that way that you're describing. And it hasn't stayed with me entirely. But what happened with that was a huge compassion for Men's Nation. I'm like, is this what it's like for Men's Nation to, like, this is how they're walking around all the time? And it's really, really different. It's really, really, for me, it only lasted about 3 weeks, but that was long enough where I was like, wow, that's a lot to manage. That's a huge amount to manage. And so when I tell that story in front of Men's Nation, they're always like nodding. They're like, yes, now you get it. You're getting it. You're getting it. And so that was really helpful for me. But I'll say that, now, what I feel like is, in different parts of the world, in ancient culture, sexuality and ecstasy in particular is a vehicle to access other dimensions, to even travel off planet, to go and retrieve medicines from other places that are trying to be offered to Earth. And so I'll say that as I'm coming into my elder women years, that capacity and possibility is actually only growing deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I wanted to say to you, Sally, that, this idea about how much energy is spent on wanting to be in a relationship, going through the relationship heartbreak after the relationship and all that. So I had 2 marriages, I have 5 kids, and so I started talking to a woman I was working with who was doing talk therapy and body work. And I was kind of whining about being lonely. And she said, you be careful, because Pat, you are a heck of a manifester. And if you keep on like this, you're going to draw somebody in. And she said, so I really want you to ask yourself, what do you need a man for? And I was like, well, you know what I need a man for. She's like, okay, but you can have that without having a man. Okay. She said, like, really having one. She goes, because your work is really, it's needed. And it's like, you don't need someone who's jealous. You don't need of you and your capacity. You don't need, she was naming all these things. She said, so be careful about calling this in. And I thought to myself, yeah, when I was in my childbearing years, I needed a helpmate to raise these kids. I felt like I needed support with the income piece. So that's a big part of the pain of being a woman, is the economics of it. Oh my God, unless you find a way to break out of that. But I'll stop with this and say that, so as I was bringing up this morning about invoking the ancestral line, for my ancestral line, wealth was held by the women, what we call wealth. I'm not even sure we had a word for that. And we didn't have a word for land, but in these English terms today, the women were the holders of the land, the women were the holders of the livestock. And so the idea was that if something happened between the man and the woman and she said, I'm done, that he could always go back to his mom or his sisters because they were holding the wealth on that end. So it was a flip that way. And so I've been invoking that and saying, wow, I'm holding land and I'm holding funds to take care of the land right now. So help me understand what was that mindset? But I also have a sense that there's something new. It's not only looking backwards, it's moving forward too. But I will also say that, you know, when I first started dating this man, right away, I ended up saying to him, I said, you know, I got to tell you right off the bat, I have the biggest, baddest sugar daddy a girl could ever want, which is spirit, which is creator. And I'm like, and so you're never going to be able to compete with that. And I got to tell you, I cannot live within the means of modern world paradigms economic structure. It's humiliating and degrading for a brown woman like myself, and I'm not going to do it. Furthermore, guys sitting there listening to me, furthermore, you know, I can't live within that economic means because of the things that spirit is asking of me to do. So I have to expand. I have to break all the boundaries of the economic holds that would be placed on a woman for me. And that can be really disruptive in relationships. Speaking of, you know, having to open up to what are these new definitions or new possibilities for what our genders or masculine and feminine hold.
If it's okay, I wanted to ask you a question, Yosi. I realize I'm being out of order, but what I hear something when you ask, how has being a woman been painful for you? I hear in you something that wants to tend and care and bring awareness to issues of violence or sorrow, difficulties that as a gendered collective women have experienced. And I wanted to understand more about that because it's clearly something you hold, that you want to bring this up and put it under the light.
Yeah, well, I'm a little touched that you bring it. It's a tender spot for me. I talked about it in my opening remarks. I mean, the fact is, it's been known for millennia, and Me Too has highlighted it, that there's a lot of sexual violence that men make towards women, and men have violence more generally, and we're enculturated to toughen up and disconnect from our heart, which is the only way we could do it. But I think invariably there's shame that men experience, whether we're aware of it or not. There's collective shame that we experience, that I experience, for the fact that men have done that. And unless we confront that shame, then we'll just keep doing it. And as long as men continue to do that, women are not going to trust men and are going to hold resentment and anger, which then contaminates our relationship. So I'm doing it for women, but I'm also doing it for men to free us all from this legacy of violence. Because as you all are saying, the true masculine is not power over, it's power with. And that's what I was talking about in my opening remark, which is I was looking for, what is a healthy vision of masculinity that lets me own my power without, using it to abuse anybody else? And a lot of men these ways are afraid of their power now, because with that power, a lot of violence have done. So we've disempowered ourselves, and we lost the dignity that we carry as men. And that's not good for men, it's not good for women. So, but the only way we'll get through it is if we acknowledge the pain and the violence that we've done, and the fact that women walk the world with fear and lack of safety. And that's for my daughter and for all women. I don't know why.
Thank you, Yosi. Yeah, thank you.
I would also add to that. It's not that women don't have violence. You know, women carry as much violence as men do, at least speaking for myself. It's just that women have been socialized into other ways of behaving. And women have not been encouraged to play, I mean, these days more than when I was growing up, but to play contact sports, you know, to work with violence in ways that are actually socially acceptable and allow it to be expressed. Because, you know, aggression is a natural human trait, and we all need to learn how to channel our aggression. And that, I think, I have a friend who has for 40 years run a group in where I live, the Monterey Peninsula, called Men's Breakthrough. And it's very, very popular. Men from all walks of life, you know, blue collar workers, wealthy people, they come together in groups and they allow themselves to be vulnerable. And the whole breakthrough process for men, according to my friend, is creating a safe space for men to be vulnerable, which means being able to admit their shame in ways that, you know, women in the women's movement, part of the great thing about the second wave women's movement is that we all got to sit around and talk about our pain with each other and be vulnerable, and, you know, and experience coming together around these things that create shame for us. And I would say that it's very necessary for men as well to be able to do that, and to have a space that allows them to do that. That where basically there aren't any women. You know, I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We are such witnesses of each other. We judge each other's vulnerability. Men, women's, and women's, men, and, you know, sometimes you just need to get off with your peeps.
Yeah,
You know,
but
and
vulnerability is strength, really, because we have to have the confidence that we can carry it. So, but I will just say, and one other thing, we all carry shame. And one of my essays is "No Shame in Shame." So,
right.
I have a question for Tami that's been burning for a little while. So because this is the women's panel, right? And you are the one in relationship with a woman, which is a whole other thing than when we talk about, you know, finding a sexual partner or being supported by a man. And I would really love to hear a bit. I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I'd like to hear a bit about you as a woman, being with a woman, and everything that the gifts and what that entails, so that it's not only weighted towards heterosexual relationship.
Sure. Well, I've been with Julie Marie Kramer for a little more than 21 years now, and it is the greatest resource, joy of my life. It's the centerpiece of my life, and she's my evolutionary partner. I think of her also, and it is a little bit, this is my experience of like living with a goddess. And what I mean by that is she's very demanding. She holds incredibly high standards. She both sees me clearly, which means my faults, and she loves me deeply. And that combination is amazing, to both be seen in your totality for the weaknesses that you have, and seen in your strength and embraced at the same time. Yeah, so that's a little bit of something to say. And early in our relationship, in me working out my inner patriarch, I was a little bit like, okay, so we're going to navigate all these things, but basically this is like a 51-49 situation, right? I'm still a little, I have more money, you know, I'm older, 11 years older, you know, and it was like immediately, because she's a goddess, it was like full stop. No, 100%, 100%. We're both 100%. You know, so that has, from the very beginning, and that has been so important for me, all the growth that comes with that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful.
Yosi, I want to go back to your question about what kind of sacred masculine might we look to, and especially this question about power. So I was saying, you know, I often, I was told at Machu Picchu that I needed to work with Men's Nation. And the way it was said to me was Men's Nation has made a prison of this life for themselves, and they want to get out, but they don't know how. And so please, daughter, do what you can to help that as part of your spectrum of work. And so one of the things I was told was that I should meet with Men's Nation and I should be the only woman present. And I've talked with men about this and they said, yeah, that's the only possibility for how that could work. And part of what I was supposed to do was to talk to them about what the women's medicine is from the ceremonial capacity that I referred to earlier. Because at least in many indigenous cultures, and the two that I come from, there is this idea that there's an archetypal sacred role for Men's Nation to be protector of life, to be protector of the life bringer and the elders and the children, and to also provide for life. That doesn't mean it's exclusive, but that's a part of it. So I've been having to say, I know that's not good news in this modern world paradigm. That's horrible news. But I was told by these grandmothers, these spiritual grandmas, that if I could explain a little bit more about how I see what the women hold and for those who identify as women, to be holy earth surface walker, life bringer, life bearer, standing with the full authority of this Mother Earth, synonymous with earth, synonymous with life, that would be helpful for Men's Nation to understand why that's still important. In days of many men having gone through a divorce in which they're stripped of everything, that idea of being that kind of presence is really difficult. But when we put it in a different paradigm, in a different context, it can again create some space. So whether you actually adhere to that paradigm or agree with it, there's still a space that's being made. And so one of the things that I always end up having to say to Men's Nation is I end up having to apologize for my bad behavior, believing that the power over paradigm was the only game in town and what that elicited from me. But part of what I say is, I never wanted to pray for you. I didn't want to pray for you to be powerful because I was cutting my own throat in that paradigm. Mm. But now that I'm looking at it from a different paradigm, I can say that I do pray for you to be just as powerful as you can possibly be in mind, in heart, in body, in spirit. And I ask that you dedicate all of that power in service to life and in service to this Mother Earth. And if you do that, then I know I have nothing to fear.
Mm.
That's wonderful. Pat, thank you so much. That's like a perfect note to end on, and we have to because we're out of time. I do just want to remind everybody that each of the speakers on this panel is having her own experiential session later in the conference. So you'll have an opportunity to share space with these fabulous women in a different way where they're in control, not Yosi and me facilitating their session. They'll be able to do exactly what they want.
And you'd be able to ask questions and interact more, which we were not able to do here, unfortunately.
So thank you very much. And I will go back to our MC.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was really a joy.
Thank you, my fellow panelists and our hosts. Thank you.
Wow, 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 wow. What a beautiful, beautiful panel. Thank you, everyone, for giving your heart, your wisdom, your lived experience, your strength, your hope. It was just so beautiful to listen. And I, for one, I don't know how I can do it more, but I'm really looking forward to queering it up. What about you, Teju?
Amen. Amen. I mean, so many nuggets and insights from this. I honestly could have listened to that conversation for hours. Everything from Michaela just highlighting the importance of coming into our bodies and the wisdom our bodies have, to Sally speaking about Ardhanaishwar, who I was excited to hear about as someone who grew up Hindu. And also I loved what Sally was talking about of like finding out who we are independently of romantic relationships sometimes. Mm-hmm. I loved Pat distinguishing between men and the power over paradigm, but we don't even know who Men's Nation is right now. And because they've been so conflated with this power over paradigm, and what does it mean to really understand that paradigm and transform it? So That was so beautiful. And I just so appreciate Tami's willingness to be personal and real and authentic. I just hope I can be like her in all of my interactions. I mean, there was just so much wealth in this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks
Um,
again to all of you for being
yes,
here.
thank you
Katie,
so
what do
much.
we
And
have up next?
yeah, great question, Jordan. So, okay, we've got two things coming up next. A break is one of them that some of you might be very excited about. Another one is an empathy breakout, which I'm personally very excited about because I'll be facilitating it. So the empathy breakout, just to make clear, is a chance for us to be in small sessions and small groups together and process what we've been experiencing, feeling, thinking so far in this session. So you'll come in, and whoever joins, I'll lead us all in a 5-minute meditation, and then we'll move into smaller breakouts with about 5 people each. And in these breakouts, you'll have a chance to share from your authentic experience, like Tami, from your own body, from your own heart. And everyone will just listen to what you have to say. No one will react, no one will offer advice. And then when you're done, you bow out. Someone else will bow in and speak from their heart, not necessarily directly speaking to what was just said. So it's a sacred space for practicing deep presence and deep listening. So that's going to be happening at the top of the hour, which is 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And Jordy, tell us about how long we have for this break here.
So everyone prepare to be back at 1:45 Pacific, which, what is that in Eastern time? 4
p.m. 4 p.m.
4 p.m. Okay, great. Time zones have never been my strength.
We need that timelessness
I
that
know.
Michael Mead was talking about.
Exactly.
Oh, can I add one thing, Jordy?
Absolutely.
So I saw some requests in the Q&A. Thanks to all of you who are doing the Q&A. Please keep bringing in questions, feedback for us. It's so helpful. We have opened up the chat for this lunch session, so you should feel free to express yourself in the chat, share insights, takeaways, etc. So that's available now. And then also wanted to share that Michael Mead's poem, the Rumi poem that he shared, we're going to be sharing here in the chat as well. So you should be able to find that and access it if you need it. So thank you all so much for being here. This is really a gift, and enjoy your break. And hopefully I'll see some of you in the empathy breakouts.
See you on the empathy breakout or back here at 4:45 Eastern, 1:45 Pacific. Bye, everyone.